This is Early Exchange where the big story lives, and our big story for this segment is the exit of multinationals in Nigeria. According to a survey done by former director of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the exit of multinationals in Nigeria has cost about 94 trillion naira when it comes to loss of output. What will be the impact of these on the economy? And the questions are, what are the factors responsible for these, and how can this development be managed that won't be to the detriment of the Nigeria economy? Let's begin our business of shaping policy in this regard by bringing in our guest, our in-house analyst. We've been joined by Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Good Souk, good Nigeria.
I love that slogan. And
Good Souk, good Nigeria. That's great. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Friday edition of the show.
My pleasure to be with you.
What a way to set the tone for the weekend as well.
He always does that.
You know, like you're looking like the bride's father.
Yes. It was an ashwabi that I was taking, so you can see the colors are reflecting.
Great to know. But the only thing is that when we're done with the show, it doesn't take us along to the events.
No, that will happen. You know, it will happen. It's part of the arrangement for the weekend.
Yeah.
Trust them.
Okay.
All right. It's not a good news, but we just have to start on this note. You know, the exodus of multinationals in Nigeria. At a point, Nigeria used to be the investment destination for these multinationals. And then now the trend is in the last 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, you see them leaving Nigeria. According to a survey done by former director in Lagos Chambers of Commerce, who has to look at the output of these companies to Nigeria, 94 trillion in 5 years. How do you react to this kind of news, and what has changed?
Well, it comes with a lot of misfeeling, and it's not something to be celebrated to see that businesses are not doing well or they are folding up. But it's a fact of life that you put money in investment and you expect that some good things happen to you. And then, of course, you cannot see those good things happen. These are issues that are of concern generally. I was sharing with a colleague yesterday about the way we do business in this environment without trying to talk people down. Is the energy we put into research, lifestyle of your product consumers is very weak. If you look through the books, if you're somebody who follows the market and is of it, you see all these big companies that you are calling multinationals, you see they have not been doing well even in the stock market, most of them that are listed in the last 10 years or thereabouts. So there have been this struggle to survive. And in my own way of looking at it, two things could be that, one, here in this environment, we are so poor and weak in terms of corporate governance. And secondly, we also don't pay attention to the little things that matters. Looking at how your customers or the state of your potential customer. Because when you produce a product, you are not the one consuming it, somebody else is going to buy it. So as you are pricing it, you must also be imagining and looking into the pocket of the person who is going to buy, whether he has a competency to buy. So these are some of the issues that for me are really of great concern. And I think other business people must also learn from this model and see how we can use what we have to drive the process and still achieve results.
Two things you've said, corporate governance and paying attention to the things that matter. Let's come to corporate governance first. If you say that people around here don't really pay attention to corporate governance, some of those multinationals even come with their staff at that level that are in charge of the policy making and the governance of the organizations.
Yeah, no, but you see, law does not allow that per se. Because if you're going to do business in Nigeria, you have to ensure that there are local people here who really are stakeholder in that business. So you
Or
can't.
ideally decision makers?
Oh yes, of course. They sit on the board and determine how things are done. And this is a real issue that you find that you see the way they are governed here is different from the way they are governed elsewhere. Because you see the local input here, you are looking at it. We're talking about remuneration of director, MD, CEO, and the rest of it, the lifestyle that you are going to create. You take, for example, you are running a business that's not making profit, and then your house is in Ikoyi here. So these are some of the issues that you have to deal with. So once you are carrying such burden in business, the possibility of being able to break even become very, very remote. So these are the nuances that we must look at when we talk about corporate governance.
And to things that matter, what things would matter for multinational companies? Some of them even became household names because of the products and services that they offer. But what made it impossible for them to continue making profits after so many years of operations?
You see, it just take it from their home country too, because they're also struggling in their home country. And what's responsible is also to look at the model that you put in place. If you have a model of business that is in place that you're driving, where of course you're emphasizing top-notch quality, for example, in a rapidly changing world, you see, there's something that somebody will have to think twice. I remember some years ago, we were making an investment decision in church. We wanted to buy a church organ for music. And then somebody said, oh, we needed to buy a top-notch church organ that will cost about 45 billion. And I said, what do we need it for? Oh, he said it will last a very long time. And I said, nobody is needing anything that lasts a long time. People simply need something that is functional. Because technology is evolving every other day. If I put a 45 million down to buy a church organ, whereas I can see a 2 million organ to use, after 2 years, I change it and buy the new that is in vogue. So why would I put 45 million down to put on a machine that after 2 months, it become obsolete? And then, of course, the new generation of people are coming and asking for its change. So these are the kind of decisions that every businessman must understand that, yes, when you are creating quality in an environment where poverty is prowling, you must also be very conscious that there's somebody who has the wherewithal to buy it. So if people don't have the wherewithal to buy it, then there's a problem. And that fundamental problem is what you are seeing. So you are seeing alternate brands, which may not be as qualitative, but at least they are serving the purpose, and then people switch to those brands.
So
All right.
does that suggest that it's a thing of purchasing power here?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. That is what is globally. So if you go to even the most civilized clients, you see, China is feeding those markets because their technology is cheaper, the product is cheaper, and so everybody is looking for cheapty because people don't have that luxury money anymore. So it's also good that companies pay attention to some of all these things, that when you are producing or you are designing a product for the market, you must put into consideration the people who are going to buy. And now once you don't put that into consideration, you get into trouble. Because most of these things, see, it's easy for people to speculate and say, oh, maybe because of security or things like this, that's why they are running. Of course, in the last 10 years, they didn't run because security has been here for more than 10 years. So the issue is much more than the security. The issue is much more than government policy. The issue is, for me, which is fundamental, is the inability of these companies to actually be able to study the environment and see what they can do. Just check it out. It's like a lifestyle here. If a company is having issues with its finance, the very first thing they kill is the research wing of that company. So companies seem to invest so much in finding out, whether from the retail outlets, from their distributors outlet, or even from the end users of the product, how they feel about what they are doing. So all they think is that they sit down in one office and they are using the macroeconomic indicators to determine what the next price will be. I read of a popular brand yesterday while we were going. That was why I was sharing this conversation with my colleague. And I was saying, they are declining. About 400,000 subscribers has veer to alternative, and now they are rethinking their model. But I was saying that it is common sense for somebody to have understood that, look, things are difficult for people. People are struggling to pay a subscription of 2,000, and then you move it to 4,000. And you expect that they are going to generate money from somewhere. It's not going to happen. So you must begin to look at what new value are you going to add that will make it compelling, that people can see beyond those prices. So this is the challenge that you see many companies have. And because you don't put research into focus, you're looking at, oh, how much more money are we going to say, oh, these are overhead. So rather than be thinking what overhead is, think how to cut down overhead, maintain a lane structure, and then you will be able to compete favorably with people who are within the space.
All right. If you look at some of these multinationals that are leaving when it comes to corporate governance, some of them have good track records. But let's look at the impact of the business environment here, the cost of doing business in Nigeria. And when you talk about the cost of doing business, you talk about, power supply, which is very crucial. Most of these companies, they will have to generate their power supply. If I remember, I was listening to a report where a particular private entity talked about spending about 50 million naira monthly to generate power supply for its company. So when you look at the cost of doing business in Nigeria, how has that contributed to the exit of those multinationals?
You see, this is what I'm saying to people. You can draw the graph, and then you can reach your conclusion. You can take selected countries in the continent and check out which country is having lower cost of power than Nigeria, for example. Which country is having lower taxes than Nigeria? Which country in the world? You can put that graph on the ground. See, when people talk about cost of living, it's because we're looking at ourselves. But if these people are operating elsewhere, then there's something that's more fundamental that we are not addressing, which is far more for me than what you look at the macroeconomic indicators, such as high tax or this thing. In Germany, where they are paying for 3% corporate tax, are people not doing business there? What's the cost of energy in Germany? What's the cost of diesel in Germany? What's the cost of petrol in Germany? So you can figure it, you can find out. These are not difficult to find out. So all you just need to do is to check what they are selling in their local currency and convert it to Naira at the rate we have. So you will be able to get a feel of what it is, whether it is actually these things that are the driving force. But one of the things you must also not fail to factor into this conversation is that with the floating of the exchange rate in Nigeria, a lot of people were making free money so that the opportunity also has closed because it was a door that was opened. If you remember the conflict that Nigerian government had with some airlines, foreign airlines, some 2 or 3 years back, that they said, oh, there are remittances, that government has taken it. Was government really taking the remittances? Or the fact that they were wanting to get their money, which they were charging us in Naira, and wanted official government rates to take the dollar, which was a drain on the economy. So since, of course, government also have floated dollar, and to say, well, if you want to buy dollar, what they are selling in the black market is what we are selling. You see that the window is also closing. So it's good that we put the entire card on the table so that we're not looking at one direction to say, oh, this is why some people are leaving, and then we use it to score cheap political goal or blackmail. So I don't believe in that. It's for me to look at it. What are really historically responsible for some of all these things that we are talking about? You look at the brand, and of course we know the brand, we know what they sell. But the things that they sell, there are also local companies who are selling cheaper things than what they produce. And they are serving the purpose for a population that is poor. So the insensitivity in the environment is also responsible for the low value of their stock in the market as we speak.
But I would love you to see it from this dimension because I heard you correctly. But look at this, the fact that when it comes to power supply, you have different categories. You have band A. In fact, most of these multinationals, they are sited in industrial areas where they should belong to that category, which means they should have constant supply of electricity for like 18 hours or more. How many of them do enjoy that? Like the reference that I make, that I refer to, a private entity that spends about 50 million naira on power generation. If that has been channeled into running the business, wouldn't it have been better? Will it have made any difference if there's regular power supply and then the money being expended on generative alternative power supply could be channeled towards growing the business? Isn't that a factor?
This is I agree that of course we have rate changes as a result of a removal of subsidy from petrol, which they have enjoyed
How?
for eons. Because the Nigerian government has been paying subsidy on electricity and petrol for God knows how. And who are the biggest beneficiary of this subsidy is the same people, these multinationals, who can pay for it, but they are paying peanuts as every other citizen is paying, which of course government had to borrow more money to be able to subsidize their operations. That's what it means. But that's why I'm asking that you can do that comparison first and foremost to see, number one, which country is having a lower cost of energy than we have. How many countries and where do they live? So you can be able to determine that one. That's number one. Number two, you check the stock performance of this company that are living in the last 3 years. Then you will be able to see that how will the impact of a subsidy that was removed less than a year ago for diesel and for electricity less than 2 months ago. So these are the issues that we have to deal with. I also see even places where people, I was in Radisson Blue in UAE, they generate their electricity right in their compound. Not supplied by the government. So
how many companies can do that?
Yeah, but what I'm talking to you is that these guys are doing it and they're still doing business in that environment. They are making profit in that environment and they have not run away. So what I'm saying is that there is more that meets the eye than the kind of analysis or picture we paint. The company gets to this place because you see the environment is very hostile. Somebody asked me a very simple question the other day, and they said, look, if you go to places like Borno, where there's insecurity, places like Zamfara, where you have banditry, the only trade that is prospering there is NGO, which are foreign dominated. So we can't factor insecurity as a part problem that, of course, this is why companies are not doing so well. We must look beyond what is being painted to see that companies are also looking at what model would they need to operate. I mentioned it in one of our shows yesterday. China had this conversation with their top businessmen and said, oh, we have today multinational living in our country. But the history that we have seen over the period of time is that from the 1980s, we see multinational moving into some ecosystem because of some tax holidays. Then after a while, 10 years after, we saw them move to a new ecosystem. Then 10 years down the line, they have moved into our ecosystem. And the question to ask at that point was, are we going to allow them to move out after 10 years? And if they must not move out, what are the things that we can do? And they had a solution in investment in humanoids, because they saw that the factor of labor was so significant to the cost of production. And therefore, because as lifestyle changes, people ask for more money. And as workers are asking for more money, the cost of operation of the company is increasing. And then, of course, that affects pricing and the rest of it. And so they will no longer be competitive. So they are looking for an environment where labor will be cheaper. So what did China do? Replace human being with machine. So that ecosystem is still housing those companies. So 10 years after, they are not considering moving because you can't find cheaper labor. Machine is just press the button when there is reason for production, and the machine just produce. When you don't need it, you switch off the button. They won't go on protest. They won't go on strike. They won't ask for more money. They just remain there. So these are where people are thinking and remodeling their businesses. So when you're also seeing that, of course, you're seeing, again, you just try and Google and check it out, the top 10 companies globally. You see that these companies who plays in the big pharma sector, these companies that play in oil sector, fast consumer moving products, check them on the list, whether they are first 10, they are not there. Tech companies are taking over. So, and everybody is moving and driving toward that direction. With the coming of AI, a lot of people say, so for you, owning a big structure like this is already a burden. You must also look at it from that angle, because the cost of servicing a building like this is massive. So if you have outposts in like 10 countries, which means you have such facility, you will be paying diesel, have you? You will be paying maintenance of the facility and the rest of it, and this increases your cost at the end of the day. Now you're also thinking about, look at it, why do I really need this? Amazon is selling, they don't have a shop. So they are not paying for shop, but it's one of the richest companies, as you can see. So people are also changing the model of doing business.
But even that,
to be able to make profit.
Even at that, let's look at the way some of the multinationals exit. For some, it's not an outright exit, it's a transfer of ownership. You have some companies where the original owners have left, sold stakes of the company to maybe owners that are indigenous of that country or to a different company. And then they move on to another country, and there they have their own new company starting up. Now, from what you said, what China had to do to retain companies to ensure that they do not leave, is it time Nigeria begins to look at that? And what would that mean if it's not really about the environment, as some of these companies still exist, but under different ownership?
You see, if you play in the stock arena, you know, for example, most people who play in the stock, they are speculators. If I put my money in your company, all I'm thinking is what's happened to the stock. As the value is going up, then I can think of selling and I think I'll remove it. Now, when I see there are no prospect of growth, what do I do as an investor? I move my money away and take it to where money can make sense. So, because the motive from elementary economists of every entrepreneur is to make profits. So if you're an investor, you're making profit. But let me tell you, and this is the model that I'm trying to canvas. You go and check the people who are buying off this thing. They are people who understand the Mudas triangle. They know fast pace, and they know that there's also cost part. Because if you need quality, you have to invest more, and then you have to spend more time. I gave a sample on Soup Post yesterday. I was trying to set up a factory in Benin to do slating of tissue. I had a quotation from a company in Germany that gave me a quotation of about 600,000 plus euro for a machine. So I placed same across to China. It was about $21,000, which was a far cry. A simpler technology, but doing the exact same thing. Now, the cost of maintaining that European-based machine will be quite expensive. So why you are saying that it's people from Asia that are taking over this company is because they depend on low-end technology. And yet they can break even. Now, relying on the supply of heavy technology from your own country, which, of course, in 10 years, 20 years, you haven't break even. I can't even talk about what the environment is going to portend for the business in the next 2 or 3 years. So people talk about strategy today, long-term strategy. I teach strategy most of the time. So nobody talks about 30 years plan anymore. When they are talking about long-term strategy today, people are talking about between 3 years and 5 years. There's where that you can sit down and be planning for 30 years. Because like they say in management, we are living in a volatile environment. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is the defining factor for businesses globally.
All right. Let's make reference to what the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, said in this regard, as regards the exit of these multinationals, and I would love to quote him. He said, one of the major drawbacks to the impediments for them, that is the exit of this multinational, was they did not have liquid foreign exchange market. He talked about the issue of access to forex, which significantly, could make a large impact. How do you react to this? Talking about access to forests, which has also been identified by Wale Edun as one of the setbacks.
So, but this again brings us to the real question, which we should have asked. Some of these things that are requiring FS, could they not be sourced locally?
Some of these equipment are manufactured abroad. Not locally. Let's accept that fact.
Leave these World Bank economies. Except you are installing a new line of production. Do you need new machines?
What about the spare parts? Some of them might not be available locally.
What about the raw materials even?
Yeah, this is a question. Raw materials. Can't they be sourced locally? Should we?
Now I'm talking about spare parts.
You see, but even let's look at the service industry, where they didn't really needed to rely on any kind of importation. That I pay you, you charge me 2 million to travel from here to United Kingdom in Naira, and I pay you here 2 million, and then you transfer the burden of remitter to the government and asking him to give you an official window to buy dollar at cheap rates so that you can take it to your country. That was why you saw that a lot of local airlines were fusing. And our government was massaging that ego because we didn't want them to leave. But we're bleeding the economy.
But it doesn't erase the fact that these spare parts are not available in Nigeria.
Yeah, but why?
Even for the aircraft.
What are we talking about? The aircraft that we're talking about, spare parts.
Even to service them, you have
most of the things that you need to produce aircraft, you can find them in Nigeria.
But do we have?
So why are they not investing in the value chain of their business in Nigeria to develop that value chain so that they can become much more profitable? This is the point. So it's not as if, take for example, they take cashew from Nigeria, process it in the Cote d'Ivoire of Vietnam, and you bring it back to us for sale. So you can imagine the two-way logistics, how it adds to the price of what you are doing. So what happened, because the nut is found here, for example. So what can't we invest in that value chain that we can process it here and sell it and cheaper it, then make more money?
Whose responsibility is it to make that investment? The businessman,
yes. Government doesn't have business.
What if the businessman is considering profit, which we have already established?
No,
the main
he will even be
business.
much more profitable if you invest in that value chain. So you can find that you are investing in that value chain, that is giving you more money than really. But you see, because there's also the international policy side of it, that even the sending country to are interested in the money. So they are creating economy in their country. So they actually not here to say they want to do you any kind of favor. They are creating economy for their country. So and that is what is a principle for them.
So at the end of the day, it profits them more on the larger scale.
Yeah, of course, because you take these issues back there, you create employment there, you create service there, then you sell back here, you take foreign exchange to build your economy. This is what is happening. So this kind of trade is one issue that these people don't want to invest in these natural resources in Africa. But they can take it wholesale and take to their country, do the refinement, bring it back to you, and they're complaining about efforts.
Isn't that where government should come
in
in terms of regulation? If the resources are here And I want to believe strongly that no company will have a control over the resources that are here in channeling a pattern and saying, I'm taking it to an expatriate country for a refinery. Just like what is happening to our oil now is because the government regulation or policy has allowed it. Isn't that where government regulation should come in?
Yeah, but you see,
Because we always say government has no business and business. This is where they have business.
Yeah, but that's what regulation is doing. So what government has done is say, okay, we are not going to fund you anymore. You know how much diesel is selling in your country. You know how much petrol is selling in your country. You know how much electricity is selling in your country. So that is how it is. So our own, we are going to sell at right price. We are selling at right price. So let's sell at right price. So you do business. So this is not profitable. So this is the conversation, because government is to regulate. But we cannot be borrowing as a country to fund private enterprises while basic infrastructure suffer.
But if government is taking that approach and not building the value chain, expecting the business people to build the value chain, so it's not as if they already have a market for the spare parts and they are outrightly refusing to patronize them. Government is expecting that they develop that, which they will not. And then government is saying we're pricing electricity or sources of energy at the price that is right for us. Let's look at the implication of this. So the businesses cannot go with that price because they've been used to a lower price over the years. They exit. What is the implication? Where does that leave Nigeria?
See, there's nowhere in the world where government is investing in the business value chain. Nowhere.
But government can encourage that.
All that government does is create the ecosystem where people can do business together. You see, but if people have a huge agenda, I will just have that conversation here in the SBL about how we perceive information that is coming from the West, and we take it as if that, it's reaching from heaven. You imagine that everybody compete for his own country. That's the point I'm making. People are first nationalistic. So even while they are taking profit, they are nationalistic in terms of where they want things to be. So what do government do? Government set regulations to say, okay, this is how we are going to do. We play around issues like tax holidays. We play on issues like, for example, waiver on import duties and the rest of it to allow you to be able to set up these things. In Nigeria, and I can tell you this authoritatively, since Obasanjo regime in 1999, duty on machinery has always been zero. So what further environment are you talking about that government should create? Machine importation here is zero. We are not taking anything on it to say, okay, because we want to encourage people to invest in that sector. So if government has done this waiver for over 23 years, and you are not seeing investment in that sector, then we must be looking for what are the reasons that are responsible.
What could be the reasons?
This is the thing that I'm saying to you. You see, because this is weird for us. We should not mourn exits of companies.
Well, we should be concerned.
Yeah, we're concerned. But what we should do is say, how do we create an ecosystem where the local players can really perform? I was very happy when Dangote was saying that day that the petrol PMS that his refinery is going to produce will be the best quality globally. That nobody has the kind of equipment, their laboratory equipment, anywhere in the world, not even the big oil companies. So this is, for us, the plus. That you have people who have the interest of the nation at heart, and they are invested in their businesses, and they are doing excellently well. All Nigerian managed business, they are trying, and they are doing very well. If you look at it, check it around in the banks and see how they are doing in the market. You see, this is the issue we need to deal with. And that's what I'm saying to you. See, governance is important when it comes to corporate profits.
So in that case, since some multinationals have left, some have transferred ownership to local owners, should that be a good thing? Is there a way to harness that and turn it to an advantage for Nigeria?
For me, that's the best thing to happen. It's the best thing to happen. That you're having your locals now also calling the shot, like we have. ExxonMobil is going, Seplat is doing. Go and check the value of Seplat in the market. As at yesterday, it's about 3,325 naira per share.
And you
The best and the biggest in the market.
you will need to drop some money for that advert after this program.
Yes, I don't mind dropping some money, but it's a local company doing excellently very well. So that's the point I'm making. So it's not just about multinational. We should be able to also tap ourselves in the back and tell ourselves, kudos, you guys are doing great. So there's no vacuum that is created. Yes, some people will lose job, but they will still find job.
All right, looking at this, and like you said, we should not mourn. What then can we do?
Yeah, of course, take advantage. See, they say when a door closes, another opens. So we take advantage of what is there and start to fill in those spaces. And then you can actually own your narrative and tell your story.
So in owning the narrative here, some companies have left, some persons would be jobless. What should local investors do with this resource of people, this people with experiences in running certain businesses? What should they do, even with some of the assets that will be up for sale?
Well, some of those assets have been already acquired. This is the part of the things that I'm saying to you. You see, there are a lot of things that today are not necessary. I remember some 10, 15 years ago in the UAE, they were asking a very simple and basic question. It was the fact is, how do we serve our people without helping them to leave the house? And we will be able to render services to them and at the comfort of their home. And then they brainstormed and said the only way to do that is to deploy technology. And then, of course, United Arab Emirates embraced e-government completely. All the big buildings they built, what did they do? They sold it out, turned some of them into hospitality industry. And then, of course, they are making money from this end. All the big buildings that we're serving as office, of course, they have been able to control them because now you stay in your house and you are working for government. Government know that you are in your place. And these things are not costing government any money. You understand it? So all of these things are possible. Take, for example, when they were trying to do traffic and say if you violate traffic offense, they carry your motor and go and keep it in one compound. And by the time they saw that this thing was becoming too much, that there's no place to park the motor because the compound is full. And they say to you today, the demurrage will be serving in your garage, not in the government's garage. Put a device in your car. When you are committing a traffic offense, the device is put in your car. So you go and put it in your house. So when you start and move that car, the device will give alarm to the police that you have violated that thing. So you have another fine. So technology has come to solve a lot of problems for the world. And I think that is where we should also be trying as much as possible to play very big and see how we can leverage technology to deliver on some of these issues that we're talking about. And that's why technology also, we also, as of today, Africa still have about 60% of the uncultivable land on earth, which also means that the opportunity and potential to actually produce food for the world is also very high in this area. So our whole situation is like we are inside the ocean, but we are thirsty, or there is soap in our eyes and we can't wash it. That's the situation where we find ourselves, because the only way we classify work here is until we wear tie and suit and sit on a table, you are not working. And that's not correct. Because even in Europe, where we are copying from, there's a whole lot of people who are doing jobs, skilled jobs. And this is where we are having the big issues. So skilled job is a huge payer there. And a lot of people get into it. Many people don't even go for university education after high school. Learn the skill and then they start to earn a living. But here we have to pay through our nose to get our children into a very top-notch school. And when they come out of the top-notch school, we will be looking for vocational trade for them. So these are contradictions that we must have to deal with. So we should not be thinking about, oh, people live there. We have a lot that we can invest in. Let people invest in these value chains of food productions, and we will see that we will all be employed to a certain degree.
All right, let's talk about the skills gap that might likely exist or coexist with the exit of these multinationals. You understand that some of them, they work with expatriates who have the expertise to deliver on this job. And when it comes to handling some of this sensitive equipment too. Now, how can Nigeria take advantage of this vacuum to create local substitutes when it comes to the skills gap that has been created by their exit, or that will be created by the exit? Of course, some of these people will leave as well. How can the locals take advantage of that?
Femi, that's what I'm saying to you. There are already alternatives. You can call the company by their name, and we can mention the alternatives.
I'm talking about skills now.
That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about skill, see, there's a telephone company, they produce telephone, whatever it is. So the skill to produce telephone it is. There's only one brand of telephone in the market. There are local substitutes already for these products.
What about standards? Ensuring standards.
Oh, yes, that is where the government plays a role. To ensure that quality assurance is maintained in some certain level. We have Standard Organization of Nigeria. That's our role. To ensure that whatever that is produced here meets certain level of standard. Don't forget that it's not only here, people also compromise standard. Recently, there was a recall issues case in the US about Toyota products that was failing brake. And they said, oh, they designed it, and by the time they did the test to see the level of emission that was coming out of it, what you saw was that this was a certain level of emission coming out. By the time they went on the road, they discovered that the emission level was higher than what was declared. What happened? They went to court, and the court said, look, so they have to record those vehicles. So those things happen in a sane environment where regulation is strong. And I think that's what we need to really speak to, that our regulators become very strong and ensure that whatever that is being produced as substitute to what is going away meet the standard, and they are right and good enough to help remedy the situation of the exit.
Now, at this point in time, what we've talked about, new players coming in, might be a long-term plan. It may not start immediately. It could also be an immediate thing.
No. That's the point I'm making. There are already new players in the market. Take the pharmaceutical market. There's a whole lot of Nigerian indigenous pharmaceutical companies who are even doing better than this one that in the stock market. How do you know what a company is doing? Is go and check their value on the stock exchange. See, when you get to the stock exchange, you will see that there are local manufacturers that are doing better than these so-called big multinationals.
Well, let's not forget that there is the angle of preference. Some customers have gotten used to certain products, and they depend on that.
Oh, that's
even for importation.
That's a luxury. You can afford it. Good.
It might not be for luxury. Perhaps could be the fact that this brand, they've been tested over the years, and they offer the quality that could also be of international standard.
You see, brand is simply a promise. A brand is a promise that is made by one product over another. But you see, all products have an entry requirement and qualifications to get into to play at certain level. So the basic ingredients are there. So that's why you are called a category. So you see, in this place, there are a lot of people playing in that category because they have met the entry level requirement. So which is basic. So all the other thing is packaging, and that's what you see.
It's not really packaging. Looking at the pharmaceutical industry, if you notice, at the time that some major players left Nigeria and those drugs were being imported, the prices of those drugs increased, but the demand did not so much drop because of maybe the effectiveness, or there were no local players producing those type of drugs, antibiotics, for instance.
You see, you also will need to understand what plays at the retail. And that's where branding actually takes place. So if you are playing in that sector and you know people who are playing in that sector, you will understand its dynamics. I produce a brand, he produces a brand. You know, I tell this person, dispense my brand, and I give you a commission. So if I come to your place to say, okay, what am I dispensing? I say, okay, you see, I put your brand in a place within the store where it's visible because you have paid for it. So it's not about the entry level. For you to play in that particular category or industry, there's basic criteria that you will need to meet. So once you are able to do it, it's like somebody said, you have premium water, don't you have?
Yes.
Now, my friend used to tell me when he was working in water factory, and he said to me, by elementary chemistry, water is colorless, tasteless, and odorless. So if your water have quality, then it's fake water.
Does that definition of water still stand? Because that's even subject to debate now.
Yeah, but that's water. It's colorless, it's odorless, and then of course it doesn't have taste. If water have taste, it is no longer water. So when you say you have a
And
premium brand,
or considered to be something else.
yes, when you say you have a brand of water that is considered to be premium, then I'm really wondering, what are you buying? Is it the water itself or is the company that you're buying? So so that's why I said they are luxury.
Could it be value added?
Well, there's no single value added because the bottle or the preform is what everybody is using. The wrapper is the same thing they're putting on it. But what is important is the content inside that bottle. So when you are buying it in a certain place, it can cost as much. When you are buying it in other places, it can cost as low. So which means I have a choice to make, either to buy here or buy there. So if I decide to come and buy here where it is high end, then that's luxury.
But it doesn't relate the fact that premium has more value. Maybe the source could be different. But now let's get to the incentives you will expect the federal government to put in place, to encourage local investors to come into these spaces where you have vacuum. It's easier said that, okay, local investors should swing into action and take advantage of this vacuum. But what other incentive do you think the federal government can put in place to attract or encourage these local investors to take advantage of this vacuum?
I think with what the government is doing in terms of revising the fiscal policy framework for the country, that's a huge incentive. From the snippet of report we had from the Ayodele Commission's report, in terms of unifying and harmonizing tax structures in Nigeria, and also to exempt some companies which have certain threshold from corporate tax, is a huge incentive in this direction. That will drive real participation. And I think one other thing that, of course, can be done, of course, which government has done over the years, is also to empower and see how we can also put down the rate. That's where, for me, the monetary policy needs a total overhaul. We can't be giving loan to people from commercial bank, for example, at 28% and expect that they're going to do business and make profit. That's not possible. So since, of course, people don't have money and they would need access to money, let's see how to drive down the interest rate, the borrowing and lending rate. And once that comes down to a single digit, we will be able to see how to encourage people with ideas to get into these spaces and fill them up. But as it is today, that aspect needs a lot of consideration. Yes, people talk about the risk that comes with borrowing, and then, of course, but we also see that most of the commercial banks are living very large. So we need to see how to work that down through CBN and say we have favorable rates where people can take money. And if the fiscal side of taxes and the rest of it is also ameliorated, then you will find that there will be huge incentive for people to do business.
What of in the area of cost of doing business or the business environment? Because this was the same thing that affected the multinationals. Are they going to be exempted from
I
these
am
factors?
not about the multinational conversation. I'm okay
It's
with
the same
With the
environment.
local
The cost of
players.
electricity.
I'm okay
How
with.
can they? That's what I'm
I'm
saying.
okay with local issues. It was on news about 3 days ago that Dangote Refinery was producing 1,500 megawatts of electricity that government cannot produce in 11 years. We saw that on the news, and it was on a headline paper. This is to tell you that there are a lot of things that people can do within the environment. Let's not over-glorify some certain people.
No, what I'm saying is, what is the assurance
that is what I'm
that
saying
they're
to
not
you.
going to face the same kind of problem or challenges?
They have been operating here. Some of these businesses are 20 years, 30 years.
But it
40
doesn't mean
years.
they are immune to
Are
being
they
said.
struggling or they're doing business and thriving?
The richest man in Africa does business in Nigeria.
That is one out of over 200 million.
If he can do it, other people can replicate it. So that's the point. See, what I'm after here is not about whether one man come here to tell you and baboozle you with all manner of grammar. But there are some people who are here. They are not doing business anywhere. They are putting money. One of the banks in their AGM that day, the man was saying, I said, look, if you put money in our bank, you have investment in 21 countries. So he can say confidently. So which means people are building wealth here. It is unfortunate that people really do not understand how blessed we are, except that you live the shores of this country. And so people see you in some certain places and they see you and they think that money is running in your body. So because there have been some of us who, without minding word, are doing excellently well, doing local business. Is it in telecom? You also see Nigeria playing, and it's playing very big. Bigger than even the so-called multinationals. So these are the things that we must factor into our conversation. What are we going to do? That's the point I'm making. How do we ensure that we manage the tax regime for people? The fiscal side is doing well. We are ensuring that we are providing security so that, of course, the cost of overhead of businesses go down. I'm also advocating rate of interest for the banks. We can drive to a single digit. And if we can go to a single digit, it will drag down our inflation drastically.
All right, let's also look at one thing that
Yeah, it can be soon. It's a matter of policy.
Let's look at one factor that contributes to the cost of doing business. Earlier, we were talking about the cost of power in Nigeria, and you were of the opinion that power is less expensive in Nigeria than other parts of the world. Let's take a look at what it costs in some other countries. For a country like China, power costs $0.08 per kilowatt hour per hour. In India, it is $0.09. In Russia, it is $0.06. In Nigeria, it is between $0.07 to $0.10. So that means Nigeria is not the cheapest, but it's still among them.
So why did they put a gap between 7 and 10?
Because you understand that there's no one price for all the bands in Nigeria. So we have the different categories: band A, band B, band C, and others. Looking at that, how the cost, the tariff for band A has increased in Nigeria to about 250 naira per kilowatt per hour. Is it possible to revisit that for the sake of cost of doing business?
You see, there are a lot of things that are involved in the cost of doing business. And I think those are the issues and conversations that people must need necessarily to, we should be able to argue and look at them in the face and say, what are the real costs of doing business here? In my own thinking, I may not be very correct, but I assume that the cost which value takes away from us is far more than all these costs, other costs we are putting on the table.
How do you mean?
Insincerity, corrupt nature of the mind of the average person. These are hugely more fundamental because they all add up to the cost. I was sharing somewhere on Sunday and I said to them, take for example, even this one that they said petrol is expensive. You give your driver 10,000 to go and buy petrol. He brings a receipt of 10,000 to you. But actually what he bought was either 6,000 or 5,000. So what happened? You go back and buy a second day. He does the same. It's not helping you. It's only increasing your costs. And we see this happen along business space. This is a flaw which we need to invest in. Where, for example, people are using the business owner time for their private business, increasing costs. Where people steal stationery. I was reading a report, I think it was from the head of service, Mrs. Son. I said how they were able to use this email to save 60 billion from the cost that government was spending to buy stationery. What stationery? Paper and biro. So there are a lot of all those costs that businesses are carrying that you can't see elsewhere. But in our client, it's like a way of life.
But isn't that a secondary cost rather than the primary? When it's talking about primary, talk about, let's go to the elementary of economics now, factors of production, especially for the manufacturing sector. It starts from the root cause, which is the primary, when it talks about factors of production. Your land, some of these people will have to even construct the road to their factories. This is adding to the cost as well. Not just about the secondary cost, which is about corruption.
But why didn't you announce it? You didn't pass your economics in school very well.
Now I'm just making reference to that.
So if you pass your elementary economics, you would understand that the factors of production are not limited to just land, which of course
I just make reference to that to give an example of what happens to the manufacturing sector.
Is part of it.
Yes, I understand. Cost of labor, yes.
So if people are part of your cost of production, if your people are thieves, what will happen to your overhead? How will you call people secondary? The most fundamental part of production is even the people. Land is constant. Capital, you can work. Even the capital, there's also a people factor of it. So this is, I say people is secondary. It's primary to us. Because if you have done small business before, you will understand this thing that I'm telling you. I remember when my wife used to have a shop. She's selling there. The person that is the shop attendant is doing a job every day and has never brought money back. As says you can't count the profit. So she was putting money in there. In short, there was one day the lady stole some money and ran away with it. The one she has gathered. And when she was caught, where's the money? He said thieves took it from her hand. And she left. So that shop came down. I have another case of somebody, a father in God, who has a girl who was in that shop and supposed to be selling for her. Every time the girl finished selling, he go to the market to replace the wares. And so when the owner of the shop comes, everything is intact. I say, how much did you sell today? I say, I have not sold anything. Until day one, God was going to reveal this girl that the man she went to go and write exam outside of the state. And the woman went to shop herself. And all that day, people were coming. And he went to his neighbor and said, see, it's like that girl in my shop is a demon. When she stay here, people don't come. The woman said, no, it's not true. They come here every day. He go to market every day. These are the issues that I call value issues. And they are very normal in our environment. And this is also we need to deal with because, yes, you see, Over inflation. That is what we see. For example, you are seeing cost of constructing 1 kilometer of road in Nigeria. Compare it with what elsewhere. It will be times 10. Because there are so many things you have to factor into that cost, which is the real cost of doing business for me. So when you are looking at it, you are going to take a road past this place. You will settle the area fathers. You will settle the area mamas. You will settle the area boys. You will settle the vet people. So all manners of settlement, and they are factored into this pricing. That is the real cost of doing business. So if we don't work on the value system of our people to really see that people become real upright and they are content with what they agree to take, then it will be very difficult. Even if you bring down all these other costs, these other things that are putting pressure on business will continue to be there, and you will not see profit.
Is there a role technology can play in addressing some of these issues? And are there parts that government can handle, like the area fathers, area mothers settlements?
Oh, there's huge role technology can play. And that's one of the things that I'm actually expecting this regime to do. Where we don't see money anywhere, and it's all everything is by transfer, where cash is not available to people. So if we can take that away, it will just be massive. That technology, that the money that is due to government, we know that you cannot hold one receipt on the road and be sharing receipt for us. You go to our airports today, even parking space, we are still using manual paper. And we don't know how much value that goes to the government. Whereas in other places, it's so simple tag. If you don't have, the door will not open. So technology gives you access. If you go to UAE, their what they call it, toll gate is technology. There's no war. You have money in your wallet, as you pass, it's deducted immediately. If it's deducted and deducted, you don't have money. The day your car paper expire and you want to go and expire it, all that bill will be waiting for you. So there's a way to use technology to drive a process that the things that are due to government come to them. And then, of course, we can now hold them accountable for providing the basic infrastructure that will make business to work.
Okay, let me make reference to the assurance Wale Edun gave in this regard, and I would love you to react to it, even something to go by. He said, "We're in a difficult place, but the direction of travel is towards improvement. So every single day, every single month, we're looking at an improved economic situation for Nigeria and for Nigerians who are doing businesses." How do you react to that?
Every Nigerian agree, except those who are political in their approach to looking at national issues. There's no reasonable person today that will fault this regime about the steps that they are taking so far, that we are working toward a direction. But I think what government need to do is to demonstrate more goodwill in terms of cutting down on the cost of governance. And I think the regime also should embrace the open governance initiative, where things are transparently done, that the average citizens will be able to see what government is doing per time, and then they will be able to evaluate and see for themselves whether these things are working. That this secrecy that's around government, we find a way to do away so that at least the government functionaries become accountable to some extent. You see, because like they say, when there is monopoly and there is discretion, the chances are that they will lead to corruption. It's always very high. But once you open up this space, that people have alternative and they have choices, then you will discover that somehow the competition itself will moderate. But government needs, for me, to be more transparent in his communication, more transparent in his dealing with the civil society. There needs to be a lot of engagement with critical stakeholders so that we can begin to see value on this road that we are traveling.
Now, the African Development Bank is so concerned recently about the debt profile in Africa, and therefore decided to launch an initiative called Debt Management Initiative Network, where you have debt management initiatives to ensure that you strengthens the capacity of African nations when it comes to debt management. Talk to us. How has it gone to this level where most African countries are battling with these severe debt crises?
Well, I think the problem of debt in Africa is really very worrisome, especially when you also match it with our ability to even be able to pay back. It really becomes worrisome. Like everybody will say, debt in itself is not a bad instrument, especially when it's used for productive activity. And that's part of the issues that Africa had faced over the years, where government goes to borrow a facility for a specific project, and then that project really never see the light of the day, even when the funds are fully disbursed. We also see scenarios where, of course, even if it's PPP or private-public partnership, where some of these are also overvalued. And this is because, for want of word, securing the next ticket take priority over making economic sense in most African countries, because election is so important to us that winning the next election far outweigh the benefits that development can bring. So it's really very worrisome. And I think every true African should really be worried that we are piling up debts that our children may not be able to pay even in their lifetime. So that's a worry, and in so many African countries. But we also need to put some of all these things in context and also see that there are some nations who are also making some very positive impacts in this regard, that they are trying to manage their debt. Like also in Nigeria, we have a debt management office. Yesterday, in some newspaper, there were headlines that our debt has increased by about 24%, in terms of moving from 97 trillion to about 121 trillion. And I was taking my son through the analysis of that particular publication, and I said, what that means is that it looks as if that your country has borrowed more money. But the real truth of the matter is that the country didn't borrow more money. What actually played out is the fact that the value of the debt increased because of the depreciation of the naira against the dollar. So in actual sense, the debt actually reduced by about $16 billion, but the actual figure in naira is increasing. So we also see some of all these things, and these are narratives that where we continue to talk about what we do with our naira in terms of devaluation of our currency. Because, again, for me, I don't think it's a sound policy for an African nation that is import-led to be devaluing its currency against the international dollars. I feel that it's when we are export driven that we need to devalue our currency so that we can access international market for us to be able to buy. So this is an issue that again also worries us in terms of debt and debt management in Africa.
So the AFDB is setting up debt managers to help these African countries manage their debts. What do you think this is going to achieve for these countries? Although they did not name the 13 countries that are in debt crisis already.
Well, you can almost count them on your fingertip, although almost every country has a debt crisis. But yeah, you also got to look at it. Which debt are they going to manage? It's only the obligation they owe to African Development Bank that they can manage. So that's just one source. There's World Bank on the other source. There's IMF on the other source. There's also the local partners in banks on the other source. Like some people said jokingly the other day that, look, if you win an election in Nigeria, you don't even need to go beg banks to give you a loan. They will be coming to beg you to give you a loan. So these are things that you see that people continue to accumulate debt and things like that. So what ADB can do to a very large extent, since it's not a regional bank like the European Bank, is to be able to rein in on what people are taking from them, but how people manage other obligations they owe to other sovereign nations or they owe to other banks, Exim banks and these other things will be something that one will need to be considered, really.
Now, to substantiate our conversation, I would like to make reference. We don't have the soundbite, so I would like to make reference to this a statement made by African Development Institute, a director, talking about what is fueling the culture of borrowing in Africa. He said the growing financing needs for infrastructural development, poverty reduction, mitigating climate change, and tackling insecurity are driving African countries to increase their borrowing, further increasing debt vulnerability. How do you react to that? Because if you look at these factors, they are also part of the underlying issues why most of these African countries are engaging in borrowing. The effect of infrastructural gap, climate change, the need to eradicate poverty, to source for the right money to drive this narrative. Some of them engage in borrowing.
Well, I also think it's the inability of most African leaders to actually process some of this conversation is also a fundamental issue. Yes, we have a definite infrastructure gap, but there's an old English saying that Rome was not built in one day. No nation is built in one day. Development are supposed to be very cumulative. Let me drive you a little back into history. Days were in the 60s, in the early 70s, where there were a lot of incentive put in place for us to travel to UK, travel to America. You don't need a visa. All you just need is to say that you're in Nigeria. You had a petrodollar. And so people work Monday to Friday in Nigeria, and in the evening with Nigerian Airways, they are in London to do weekend things and then come back to work on Monday morning. Such was the lifestyle. And IMF were all over the place, the World Bank, telling us the reason why we need to borrow money, even when we have no need of it. And so this borrowing spree started. You see, my father didn't really go to school. He didn't go to school at all, so he could not read or write. But there were some few English words that he used to tell me growing up as a child. There's this one he used to say, honesty is the best policy. So I didn't know how he acquired it, but you see, I think that's what governments need. We need plain honesty. When you are campaigning and you are promising heaven on earth, and by the time you get into office, people are not trying to hold you accountable to your promises, then you are running helter-skelter to see how to even make a mark so that the next election people will vote for you. And this pushes you into debt. We can cut our clothes according to our clothes.
Not size anymore.
No. You know, we can take some blue, white, merge them together, it becomes a style.
Mm.
So this is what the law of effectuation in entrepreneurship study today talks about. Make do with what you have. You can imagine somebody is coming to tell you that, you see, we are transitioning from green to fossil fuel
to green
to
energy.
green energy, and this requires money. So you need to borrow money so that you can transition like us. But why are you asking yourself a very basic question? It's like I am now. Somebody is saying to me, by your status, you need to be living in Banana Island. Even when they are pushing me, I should not push myself. So this is the real issue for me about African leaders. That if people are pushing you, you don't need to push yourself. Stay within your means. Live within your means. We understand that, yes, we need good road. We can build it over time. And when we can call the appetite of very corrupt persons, and you are doing a road that this road is going to be 10 years, and you understand that by the time you are finishing at the 10 years, you will not be coming back to repair the section that you have started. We will be living well and dry. So this is the area where we need to maintain honesty. We should not be promising things that we cannot deliver. Like they says in management, it is better to under-promise and over-deliver than to over-promise and under-deliver.
All right, let's look at the reasons why African leaders come up with some policies that are not beneficial to the economy in the long run. What of the devaluation of currency? You talked about the switch or the move away from fossil fuel to green energy. Let's look at the loan conditions. Some of these things are tied, these conditions are tied to loans. So when they've already taken the loans, aren't they bound to implement some of these policies?
You see, this is why I'm talking about. If somebody is pushing you, you don't push yourself. I don't think there is scarcity of people who can scrutinize contracts in African countries. We have very qualified persons in the bureaucracies in Africa, well read in every field. So the issue of signing against or signing your debt warrant, let me use that word, in the form of a loan, for me, is hugely deliberate.
By whom?
By the perpetrators. Let me give you one simple example in Nigeria here. The P&ID case should have cost Nigeria 9,000 pounds. Because those who enter into that agreement on behalf of the government of Nigeria had no Nigeria in their hearts. evidently became very clear that the lady took 100 million naira, and our president's signature was forged to ensure that that particular contract passed through, because the president was not well. So somebody jumped in on private jet to where the president was struggling for his life and brought the document back that the president had signed this contract out. But they didn't sign that contract because it was beneficial to Nigeria. They only signed the contract because there was something that was grazing their palm and was entering and lining their pockets. So this is the problem we have in Africa. It's not that we cannot read a contract and understand that some of the terms that are factored into this contract are not good for the generality of the people. But because of what private individual gets, that's why I keep talking about value system. So that a lot of people put in this huge, markup, and you sign this contract, they are coming to do feasibility study is part of the loan. They will send personnel is part of the loan. Where you are going to source resource for the building of that project is part of the loan. And at the end of the day, only a little fraction of that loan actually entering your economy.
But
by way
still, the
of
country
cash.
has to pay.
Of course, you have to pay
the
back for all
entire
those
loan.
services because that's the entire value. So, because like my father told me also, beggar don't have choice. So anything they give you, you take. Because you are begging. You want it. You want to prove a point, maybe to your political opponent that, yes, I have done something significant or magnificent. But I think that's not the route to take if Africa must emerge. We must try and live within our means. And like everybody has been arguing, reduce the burden of governance by cutting its cost on the people. So there are some things we don't need. If you go to Rwanda, for example, today, only 4 categories of people are entitled to official vehicle, and it's 1. See that you are the head of the court, the president himself, and I think 2 cabinet ministers. Other ministers, they are not entitled to official vehicle. They come to work with their vehicle, hire their driver, and do the business of state. So these are some of the issues that Africa needs to face the brutal fact, as Professor Jim Collins would call it.
All right, talking about living within the means that Africa has, this new network that was inaugurated by the African Development Bank is the Network for Debt Managers, and their task is to provide homegrown solutions. Now, in living within her means for African countries, what kind of homegrown solutions can there be so that this debt can be managed? Because it's all about resources. If African countries have the resources to pay off the debt, then the debt will be cleared.
You see, we started off this conversation from the big pharma. The other day we were in the National Medicine Development Agency, and the Indian Consular General to Nigeria was in that meeting. And he said the path for Nigerian to go is to do as India has done, developing their natural medicine. That what India has done was to standardize their herbal practice. And now they don't just sell to India, but they are earning foreign exchange from these solutions. That is something that Nigeria can do because there are so much natural remedies here in Nigeria. But I can tell you, that agency is one of the least funded in Nigeria. because we are putting money in health. We are not even putting money in thinking solutions. And so we bought COVID vaccine on credit. India produced their own. So you don't need to borrow. So these are the things that are possible that can be done by African leaders. It only just requires that all of us sit down and, like they say, if three brothers sit down in a room and they all come out smiling, it means that they have told lies to themselves. So that's an African proverb. Because if we tell ourselves some very brutal truths, there'll be no smiling.
All right. You were almost doing that part. Let's talk about the role of institutions, in helping Africa to manage its debt crisis. You have to say that in Africa, you have powerful people, but weak institutions. How do we channel this into the issue of debt management in Africa, the role of institutions?
Well, I don't think institutions have life of their own outside of the people. If I were to think about that, I would reverse it really that we have very weak people who are within strong institutions. You see, power is not the ability to take what does not belong to you. If that is what you call powerful people, then I'm sorry. Power is the ability to create value by what nature has given to you. And so, if we had people with huge value system in our institution, they would be as strong as any other institutions anywhere. And that's where I have my argument with some of my colleagues. I said to them, when people talk about, our constitution is not is a problem, we need to. I said, let's even obey the one we have first. Let's even deal with the one we have and obey it. We will be better than this.
Okay. We do hope that with the new debt managers and what they will do to ensure that African countries, particularly 13 of them that are already in debt crisis, these countries will be able to manage their debt level and eventually come out of it. Homegrown solutions. It's kind of ironic when you think that when you compare the natural resources that African countries have that can be very, very commercial and bring in commercial gains, and yet there is high debt level on the continent. Let's watch and see what happens, and also encourage African leaders, institutions to provide necessary assistance to change the narrative in this regard. Thank you very much, Dr. Ayodele Osamhanze, for being on the show with us today.
It's my pleasure also to say to all Africans and to African leaders that Lapunio Hill said, we think and grow rich, not work and grow rich. We should stop working and start thinking.
All right.
Probably we can get out of the trouble. Thank you for having me on your show this morning.
All right, but don't forget that after this time, we have somewhere we're going. You must show us the way this time to the Owambe.
Well, it's said that I am in the middle, so whichever way leads to the front, I follow.
That's really diplomatic. All right, thank you so much for being a part of the show by watching from Monday till this time. Thank you so much. We'll do it again Monday, 8 a.m. West African time. I am Blessing Eichie. Enjoy your weekend and do not forget to follow us on our social media platforms at Sook News on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, and of course on YouTube. You can watch other episodes of the show, including this one. If you missed any part of it, be free to share your comments, like, of course, and invite others to enjoy shows like this. Enjoy your weekend.
And talking about homegrown solutions, it's also important for us to know that we need to cut our consumption pattern. It's important you manage it so that you won't run into crisis or debt crisis. What you can afford, just hold on, because men are in sizes and life, are in phases. Ensure that you do a catch up on our YouTube channel, on our social media platform at Sook News TV for the follow up on the conversation we've had earlier and the ones that are following. Don't forget, Election returns on Monday. This is our offering for this week. I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.